indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. We haven't got a lot on the agenda tonight. It's enough. Calls for a review of the minutes to start. March 6th, 2023, and April 11th, 2023. Beautiful. Did you guys read the minutes and go through them? Yeah. Are you good with both copies of the minutes?
I'll make a motion that we accept both sets of minutes as presented.
I have a second.
I'll second.
All those in favor? All those opposed? Okay. Now we're gonna start public about the apartment development at 207 Ledgewood Court.
I guess the last meeting, just as a review, on April 11th, we had a special meeting where we reviewed the application. We didn't deem it complete. There were some changes that the applicant has made that they've shared with us, and they'll present, I guess, the whole application for the benefit of the public and board, the updated version. I think we'll specifically address the changes, and we can go through the entire findings of fact, or we can just kind of get right to the conclusions of law at the end, which is going to basically be the meat of kind of what you all are finding and approving. So, but we'll go through the whole thing. And
I believe we're right there.
But the public
just
hearing is basically an overview of the project and.
yes, yeah, we're gonna give the review everything again. Some of it will be a repeat for anybody who was here the last meeting. But
You want to go through the entire finding in fact?
We certainly can. Some of them are pretty quick, but
Yeah, and I think in benefit of the public, I think we just ought to have the applicant come up, give a presentation, a brief of what they want, and then we can answer any questions that, then we can go over that finding the facts at the end, I would think.
Yeah,
After we're
makes
done.
sense to me.
He's gonna pull up some of our boards. Good evening, planning board. It's good to see you all again since about 2.5 weeks ago.
Yep.
So again, for the purpose of the public hearing, I'm going to go through a lot of information that you all have heard before. My sound all right?
Can everybody in the public see we've seen these, maybe we should they?
However you'd like me to do it. Who have we got here that's interested in this from the public in particular?
Yeah.
Yeah, we ought to turn that so he can see it. And you have a drawing up there, the revised parking.
Yeah, we're gonna show that to you.
But
Excellent. Well, again, good evening. My name is Meg Robinson. I'm a project manager with Developers Collaborative. I'm joined here today by my colleague Laura Reading, our Director of Affordable Housing, as well as Steve Weatherhead of Winton Scott Architects and Steve Bushy of Goral Palmer, our civil engineer. Today, I'd like to speak again with you about our proposed new development of 32 units of affordable senior housing. This project would be an extension of the existing Ledgewood Court affordable housing townhouse units that are located off of Piper Mill Road. Currently, there are 24 units of affordable family housing on that site. Just to kind of quickly summarize our process, in February, we submitted a site plan application for the new development. We met with you all on April 11th to discuss our site plan application, receive initial feedback, and then today is the official public hearing. And we are hoping to seek an action on our site plan application. We do hope to receive site plan approval in advance of an upcoming reopening of the 4% low income housing tax credit program. That is anticipated this fall, and that would comprise a major part of the funding of this project. In terms of an anticipated project schedule, we anticipate construction loan closing during the summer of 2024, an approximate year of construction, and then the project to open late summer, early fall 2025. In terms of property management, we anticipate CNC Realty, the current property managers of Ledgewood Court, to also manage this new development. A little bit of site information. The Ledgewood Court site is about 10.5 acres. We're proposing to divide the site and allocate 6.5 acres to the new parcel or to the new development. The two developments will be connected by sidewalks, and per your feedback from our last meeting, there will also be a new sidewalk out to Piper Mill Road. We have minimized the clearing of trees on the new parcel as much as possible for the new development. And our landscape plan does include over 40 new trees to be planted on the site. We also have a small portion of land to the east of the building for an outdoor garden with raised beds for residents, as well as a patio behind the building. This site is ideal for a affordable senior housing development in Damariscotta. The site is zoned in your rural district. It lies within your designated village expansion growth area, and senior housing is a permitted use here. The site's within a 3-minute drive of Walgreens, Main Street Grocery, your library, and Hannaford, so very accessible to a lot of the kind of everyday services. There's also taxi services available in Damariscotta through Twin Village Taxi, and we've also heard from seniors at our other developments that carpooling's pretty common. There are also senior services located within a 6-minute drive of the development at the Spectrum Generations Lincoln County Regional Center. So really well-placed site, accessible to a lot of different amenities for senior residents. A little bit more information about the project. As I mentioned, 32 units, all will be 1-bedroom apartment units. These are all age restricted to seniors aged 55 and plus. 4 of the units will be fully ADA accessible. I mentioned some of the exterior amenities. There are also a community room on the ground floor that opens out onto that back patio space. There's an upper floor lounge with laundry and a deck that opens out overlooking that back patio. There's also a covered front entrance with landscaping and seating options as well. In terms of parking, 33 parking spaces, as well as 4 designated ADA spaces for the building. Just to provide a little bit of project background, especially for members of the public who may be here, the goal of the project is to provide safe, new, clean, affordable housing option for seniors living in Damariscotta and the surrounding area who are currently cost burdened by their housing expenses. So that would mean paying more than 30% of their monthly income on housing. By providing affordable housing in your area, we allow seniors to age in place and remain connected to their existing social and support networks in Damariscotta without being cost burdened. In terms of the scale of need for affordable housing in this area, according to Maine Housing, in 2020, 60% of households in Lincoln County were unable to afford the median 2-bedroom rent here. There are currently 421 units of rent restricted affordable rental housing in Lincoln County, 222 of which are age restricted for seniors. So this project of 32 units would be a pretty significant increase in that number. For this project, all proposed units are indexed to 60% of the area median income of Lincoln County. In 2022, 60% of area median income was about $34,000 for a single person, $39,000 for a couple. Again, indexed to that number, maximum monthly gross rent for this development in 2022 dollars would be $906 per month per 1-bedroom apartment. To provide some additional context about building affordable housing, it is difficult. High and rising construction costs and restricted rental income often leads to a bridge or a funding gap that needs to be bridged. And there are several programs out there that help do this. They're often very limited. They have limited funds and they're often very competitive. So projects that achieve them need to demonstrate viability and also need to demonstrate that they require these funds to be feasible. Maine Housing in particular has recognized the heightened need for affordable housing for seniors in this area and has allocated additional qualifying points for senior housing in Damariscotta for its low-income housing tax credit program. So again, just showcasing or highlighting the need for senior housing in this area, as well as the ability to achieve funding. Finally, to achieve funding through the LIHTC program, projects must also indicate and show that they are integrated with the community, that they address a specific community need, that they utilize existing infrastructure and ensure that residents have safe and affordable access to services. Projects must also meet strict construction standards and financial viability requirements. Ultimately, in designing affordable housing, and what we've tried to do here is consider cost-effective solutions to building high-quality housing that benefits the community and provides seniors with a high quality of living. At this point, I'll pass the mic to Steve Bushy, our civil engineer. He'll walk us through some more detailed information about the site plan. An update since we last spoke.
Good evening, Steve Bushy with Goral Palmer. I'm going to do a couple of things here just for the benefit of the public and online people viewing. I want to be able to explain things very similar. It's going to be a little bit repetitive from the previous meeting that you folks have seen, but I think for the benefit of the public, since it is a public hearing. This overall plan here shows Harper Mill Road and our 10-acre parcel with the existing 24 units of Ledgewood. And here's our site, and included on this area just for a sense of scale in where we were placed compared to a similarly recently approved project, the nursing home Clippership here, which is north of Piper Mill Road. So gives you some sense of scale in where we're located in the grand scheme of things. So again, Piper Mill Road there. This is the older plan that we had seen. They just didn't reprint it, but here is our new site plan. 24 units on a 4-acre parcel that will be carved out from the entire 10-acre area. With 6 acres here for the new 32-unit building. Parking lot. Here of the board, your new plan that you've seen to get rates specific to the one item that was probably the most important was our parking lot design. And it's set back from the rear property boundary. Your standards require a 30-foot setback. At the time that we presented previously, we had a double loaded both sides of the drive aisle you could park on, and we changed that to basically a single loaded drive aisle now. So the drive basically comes in the same and goes to the south side of the building, but we kept it 30 feet away from the rear, actually about 31 feet from the rear boundary line. And we have now 33 parking spaces basically directed towards the entrance here of the building. The building position has stayed unchanged. And here's a fire lane. Yeah, Q has stayed unchanged. We did modify our patio area based on that discussion that we had with you folks, so we could get the fire apparatus beyond that. The site plan includes some native garden beds here. The solid waste dumpster enclosure, which is greater than 50 feet away from a property boundary, would be concealed enclosure area for waste collection, recycling collection. For the public, here's our parking lot. Entering in off of the existing Ledgewood, here's the Ledgewood 24 units with its parking lot, and it comes to a dead end today, and it would be extended through here into the woods. Given the parking building here that Steve will talk about in a moment. Of the site area, about 2 acres of clearing will be involved to build the building, the parking lot, and our stormwater management areas. The rest of this area here remains unchanged with respect to pretty mature woods area. So At the end of the day, the site's relatively concealed from view from nearby area. I've got a,
Will it have buried utilities?
yes,
Okay.
so I can talk about that in a moment. That's the old plan, just by comparison, I showed to you last time, so if there is something you want to look at, get to that. That's so many different views here that I wanted to represent, and hopefully cover what might be your questions here. Here's the land division plan, we're calling it. And we're breaking this parcel into two, bring the lot boundary here and run down. And one of the key pieces, at least within respect to what the planner has written up for your consideration, and that basically is the net density. So we create two lots that accounting for how you compute net residential density for parcels to assure that both of these will be compliant with your density standards. So this is the 24 units, and the 4 acres here complies with that density provision that you have. Similarly, the density provision here for 32 units in our 6.53 acre area will also comply. Basically, you take the land area, deduct out the wetlands area. We don't have any steep areas, steep slopes or anything like that. So it's basically just deducting out the wetland area. And then you have to divide by, you need 10,000 square feet for your first unit, and then 6,000 square feet for every unit thereafter. So we've done that calculation, come up with the lot boundaries. The rest of the dimensional pieces for these two lots also are compliant: frontage, lot size, and setbacks and that sort of thing. So utilities wise, sanitary sewer currently serves the Ledgewood Court. In fact, what happens is that there's a pump station at the Ledgewood Court, and with a force main that goes through the backside of the property where we're now building, goes out to Piper Mill and then south to the treatment plant, which is basically the next property owner over. We're going to be reusing the pump station and the force main. We've talked to the district about that, all of that, and they've given us their ability to provide service. This isn't a huge generator of wastewater per se, so we're comfortable with what the treatment plant capacity is going to be. Similarly, the Great Salt Bay also has water service, and we will be extending a water line. Currently, the line here ends at Piper Mill Road and comes into the Ledgewood Court. We'll tap off of that main, extend it around the existing facility, and then over to our new building, which will both have a domestic service and a fire supply service. And we are also providing another hydrant. So there's a hydrant at the beginning here of Ledgewood Court Drive. We'll have a second hydrant here, plus a fully sprinklered building. So as I understand it, certainly the water district has no issues with the water supply and capacity piece. I have not heard really anything from the fire department. I tried to reach out to them, but was unable to, I guess, connect with them. And as I understand it,
I spoke with them. Yeah, I spoke with the fire chief and the police chief. I haven't gotten an official response back, but no issues have come up, and I'll confirm that. We can make their approval a condition of your approval.
So that's water and sewer. One of the other items that we talked about at the last meeting was the installation of LP propane tank. And we do show that here on the site plan, and we are requesting that an underground tank be installed. I think there was some degree of discussion about what your regulations require as to fuel tanks. I think the terminology is exactly that: fuel tanks needing to be above ground as opposed to underground. And we've done a bit of research with your local suppliers here, and the propane guys all say, geez, we put tanks underground all the time.
Yeah.
So that's the direction we've taken. In relative to main housing and so forth, that's the requirement that we want to comply with anyway, and they require underground buried LP tanks. So
I think at the last meeting, we looked at it, the language is like permissive that you may put the tanks below ground. Not that, or they may be above ground, so it's, I think what you're proposing is. Probably meet the standard.
So currently overhead power,
But I don't think it's an issue.
Yeah.
overhead power here along Piperville Road and extend that in a short distance here at the rear of the property and then come underground from a new utility pole. We come into a transformer. This site will have an emergency generator as well for life safety purposes. We have an elevator in the building. So having a generator is key. The generator will also be wired to run that pump station on an emergency generator capacity. So that's kind of important in my view, and just interesting to hear. Just last night, in fact, it sounds like a lot of people around here, they had lost power. So
Yeah.
those are the key pieces on utilities. If you had it, I can break there for a moment if you had any other particular questions about utility.
Only other question I think somebody had brought up last time was about lighting. Was
Yeah.
it you that brought that up, Jenny?
Well, there was a question about our standards and what they had proposed.
So I have that, and I'd like to go through that quick for a moment. We're on the right board. Here's our lighting photometric plans, been updated for the new parking lot. That shows that setback of our parking area and where the lights are gonna be positioned. And the distance away from the property line. I think that had been one question was, let's see where the property line is on that photometric plan. And what this plan shows you is lighting coverage. So in any particular spot, it says 0.0, that means there's no light in that particular area. So what I've done on this drawing is more or less draw out the limits of where the lighting that we're proposing. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 16-foot tall poles. Then we have some building mounted lights, principally over at the entrance on each end, and at the main entrance on this side. We have 2 bollards, which we're going to talk about because we talked about it last time, because we're asking for a waiver on the bollards. We only have 2 of them, and they're over at a patio area here on the north side of the building. So this shows all of the perimeter. You'll see the numbers here representing basically 0.0 around that red line that I've outlined. The undisturbed buffer area here, certainly at the property line, we have no spillover of lighting from our light poles. And again, it's a 16-foot tall pole. I think your standards say you're allowed up to a 20-foot pole. We decided to keep them a little bit lower at 16.
I think it's 16.
To the 16.
Yeah, 16.
That's why the lighting designer did it as such. So the real piece here, one of the comments that was raised relates to average and maximum foot candle coverage. So we have a 2.3 number in our parking lot. It's just one particular outlier at that spot right there near the entrance. And because there's a combination of things going on with the wall mounts and then a couple of the pole lights there. The lighting supplier and designer here, Sweeney Lighting, we had a discussion with the planner for half an hour or so to go over how their approach to lighting and the standards that they were seeking to comply with. Also taking into account, though, reading through the local standard here, which in his words, more or less, the local standards are maybe a little outdated. Could use some updating in terms of today's technology and the lighting approach for things. So that's how he arrived at what he's put down here on plan, with the principal idea of safety and security for the residents, making sure that this is a compliant plan in that respect. So that's how it's all kind of played itself out here. Your standard, I believe, talks to a 1.0 foot candle throughout type term. In our parking lot, we have 1.2. Overall, across the site, we're at 0.32. So it's a question of what's the total here and what are we trying to provide for coverage. The case that the lighting designer has made is there are typically higher standards, like closer to 2.0 for foot candle coverage in a parking lot. heightened safety and security needs. 2.0 is really not all that, that's really bright. I would put 1.0 foot candle in parking lots as on the low end for certain.
Well, I think that was done intentionally. It was done intentionally to keep it at the low end in the standards.
Relative to safety and security, I guess I would say that that's marginal. But that's just our approach, and here's our number at 1.2, and the layout of our poles. That's what we proposed, and we have put that in the form of a waiver request for you folks to consider, so.
So when you say you said 0.32 overall,
Yes,
I mean, you're averaging in the whole site, right?
I believe that's averaging everything that's within
Within
all of
the,
the lighting, and it includes the bollards on this side as well.
but, okay, it doesn't mean all across the entire site average.
Yeah, I couldn't tell you if it meant across the 6 acres of the site or not. That I don't know.
I think,
Zero doesn't average very well.
But,
Since zero doesn't average very
Right.
well.
right.
I think what I had, I think I pulled it from this, was that the application proposes lighting that would provide a maximum of 2.3 foot candles in that one spot you identified. In the parking area with an average of 1.2 at a minimum of 0.04 foot candles. So the average, I believe this is for the parking area, the average was 1.2.
Right.
I think is for the
Which
parking
is
area.
shown on, I believe we submitted this photometric plan, so that was the purpose. The previous plan that we'd submitted to you did not have a summary table, so it was hard to understand necessarily what were the average numbers. So that's what we included on this particular plan.
And I don't think the code speaks to average or minimums. The standard is 1.0 foot candles throughout the parking lot.
Right.
And I also put in here, just for the board's consideration, which maybe you saw, the former state planning office put out a technical assistance bulletin about lighting, it's called Lighting Manual, Promoting Quality Outdoor Lighting in Your Community. And the standard that I assume that this kind of falls to is parking areas with low nighttime activity, which that manual recommends a maximum of 2 foot candles and a minimum of 0.02 foot candles. Just for kind of context, if you hadn't read it or don't remember, because I didn't, parking areas with high nighttime activity, the recommended maximum is 4.0 foot candles, a minimum of 2 foot candles, and building entries should have a max of 5, and then sidewalks, pedestrian areas would have a maximum of 1. So
there's also
that's
gonna
where
be
it,
a bunch of wall mounted lights all on the front of the building.
I'll point them out. So we have,
W1, right?
yeah, we have the W1s, 12-foot high mounting, so they're just above the doors basically. So we have it here on this end, then 1 here in the middle, 3 at this entrance area, 1 over on this side, and then another 1 on that end.
And they're all shut up, shielded from
Correct.
above. Okay.
Yeah. Finally, here on this plan, just to show you again the bollards. So we're providing a 42-inch tall bollard, and your standard is a 36-inch, 3-foot tall bollard. And we are asking for a waiver request simply because manufacturers typically are providing 42-inch tall. I couldn't tell you specifically why. I mean, we talked a little bit about the wintertime, snow, making sure that it wasn't getting buried or anything like that. But bottom line, it just comes down to, that's what the manufacturers typically provide. That's what our designer has provided. That's relatively routine and normal. I actually looked around at several locations around my office and other buildings around. Everything was all 42-inch tall light for a lit bollard. We only have 2 of them on this side. Again, they're going to be pretty discreet. Unless you live here, you're not going to see them. Typical light bollard as well, really only casts light within not even the 10-foot area. So pretty discreet. we can come back to this in a second, but I wanted to throw a few other things as well. Here's the landscape plan. We don't have benefit of our landscape architect being here, but ALA, our landscape architects, has done our landscape architecture work. They do a lot of work with this development team. They do a great job. They were aware of the discussions that we had. We brought up with them the point that a request perhaps from the board about planting the elm trees, or excuse me, the black ash trees. And their comment was the challenge in southern Maine right now is the emerald ash borer. I don't know much about it, but it was coincidental, I suppose, that just in the last week in my own property, I had to have a arborist tree person come because I have a bunch of oak trees, and we got talking about that. And I asked him about the ash trees, and he said, "Don't bother, because they probably won't make it." I said, "Oh, that was just interesting as a kind of anecdotal type piece." So the ash borer must be pretty tough situation right now in southern Maine, what I can gather. But as Meg had pointed out, there's a lot of trees here. I've tried to give it just a little color so you can kind of differentiate things. Point out here, yellow birches along the perimeter. We've got a bunch of the red maples, the darker green here. We've got 22 of those. No, excuse me. We have 11 red maples, 8 yellow birch clumps, 22 serviceberry. These are all 2.5-inch caliper planting, so pretty good size tree to be planted there. To the point of the design of the parking lots and the breakup of the parking lots, I'll note that we have 15 parking spaces along this side, then with an island here and another 18. I believe your code provision is that with a parking lot of every 20 spaces, you need to have an island to break them up. So felt that our approach here was pretty reasonable. We're a little less than the 20. We do have trees on each end and then in the middle. So they've tried to take a fairly robust approach to plantings, knowing that we are cutting a fair number of pine trees and so forth. But I think the introduction of certainly the deciduous trees should be pretty nice. And then I think a lot of the perimeter area will have what's defined here as a restoration mix. There'll be some lawn, manicured lawn areas here kind of on the ends and so forth. This area here, which I pointed out in the past, is our drainage area. That's just going to be minimally maintained lawn or meadow type thing. Probably get mowed once or twice a year, so it doesn't get too overly long, but it still would be a pretty nice space. So that's the landscape plan. Again, recognizing that on this southerly side, we have that 30-foot buffer, undisturbed buffer area. So there's, some trees in there that'll be maintained as well up against the property boundary.
Could you show us where the new sidewalk is going to go?
Sure. So we have sidewalk along our parking lot frontage up against the building, or near the building, I should say. That'll extend and tie into the sidewalk. There is a sidewalk, fortunately enough, in and around the existing Ledgewood townhouses, but there is not a connection out to Piper Mill Road. So we've added in that connection piece here. I did talk with the designer for the Clipper Ship, because they're responsible for building a sidewalk on Piper Mill Road, as I understand it. And so he shared with me a preliminary design, and it didn't quite have the kinks worked out of it, so to speak. So not exactly sure how we're going to cross, if we're going to do basically 90. This is effectively the end of Piper Mill Road, then it narrows right down, because the only people using it for the remainder of it are the folks going to the sanitary district. So will we come across 90 degrees, or will we come across the driveway and then perhaps 90 degrees, or perhaps a diagonal? Their sidewalk going to be positioned along here, and they have a driveway, I believe, somewhere right in here. So we just need to work out a few details there, but we will make that connection, because really need to have that once their sidewalk is in place. So
What standards do you use to build the sidewalks?
It'll be a curb and bituminous asphalt sidewalk, 6 foot wide.
Okay. I mean,
Fairly traditional. Gonna have a ramp here so that actually there's not much for ramps on the existing other than I think there's one at the ADA parking space. But we'll have a ramp here so that if it needs for ADA access, somebody can either access the new sidewalk to go out the street or access the sidewalk and
mhm.
it's tenants or what have you. We have the same sort of thing here for our new sidewalk in front of our building. I think I had pointed out in the past, and Meg had just commented on it. So we're going to have only 4 ADA spaces. We had previously shown you 6 ADA spaces here, and we only need 4 because there's only 4 ADA units in the building now. So that's been a bit of an update. This point here shows you the 4 spaces. And in fact, we just did that and it ends up with a little bit wider, broader island area in the middle. So I just figured that was a benefit to have a little bit more island space for the plantings and a couple of benches.
Wait, you said that originally you were planning for 8? Is it-
6.
Okay,
6.
now you're
Yeah.
4. Okay.
This plan, just to cover the waiver pieces, when we get to that and when we want to talk about it a little bit. So what's been written up as I understood. So the sidewalk piece, which we talked about previously, going from your standard of an 8 foot wide sidewalk down to a 6 foot wide sidewalk.
Mhm.
These are all internal sidewalks, 8 foot sidewalk on an internal development like this, with 32 units.
List of those waivers.
They're in, they're in here, yeah.
We felt that was reasonable because 6 foot's fairly traditional. 8 foot is, I thought that's a little unusual for certain. That's pretty broad. If this was a big development, then yeah, it might have some merit to it, certainly. Another waiver was on the building pieces and the offsets, which Steve can talk about in a moment. And a waiver of sidewalk here along the site frontage. That too is another one of your standards, and we're asking for a waiver since there's not much going on for Piper Mill Road. It's actually a very narrow road. Wouldn't make a whole heck of a lot of sense to have a sidewalk for that full length of Piper Mill Road. And certainly the expense of it is fairly significant. So we've asked for a waiver of that provision. So again,
Will there be does the Piper Mill, the nursing home development, do they have a sidewalk going up the road on the other side?
They're supposed to, yes.
No, not up the road, down towards School
Only
Street.
down the road, not up the
No,
road?
no, does not go all the way up the road.
Right.
There's nothing up there. So
that's
Well,
what I
there's
had
the
understood.
Casner Creek Community Forest.
then let Castner Creek Community Forest put a sidewalk
Okay.
in.
Well, it's a recreation,
I,
it's a potential recreation.
it's not
just wanna
up to
say.
their burden to be putting a sidewalk up there.
Okay, it's right at the curve. I'm just
Yeah.
saying, I'm telling Mike, it's right at the curve of the road.
Yeah.
Across
I know Steve wants to talk about architecture a little bit, but I'm going to show you, again, these are ALA, our landscape architect, has done some nice renderings to give you some perspective. These have been updated from the discussions that we had and the changes that we made relative to the parking. So here is the entry area. Here's the patio area, which we narrowed up because it had been discussion about our fire lane in the back here. So we've kept the fire lane now 18 foot wide, which is, it's a lane and a half. Feels pretty comfortable for the fire apparatus. We broadened it out though a little bit just so we have some space. We're in discussion with, this is the exit door out onto that patio space, and Steve can speak to maybe some options that might be considered there. But that's just an area for residents to get out. We'll talk about the second floor little area as well. This is just a patio area,
What is the dimension of the patio? It's 15 feet, you said?
12 feet now.
12 feet by,
I think it's about, yeah, 48. Actually have it at 10 and a half on the plan now, 10 and a half by 48.
Even size.
And that's another view of that rear area, the fire lane. a little taller grasses around what the landscaping is going to look like up against the building. So hopefully I've given you what I have here for materials that we can talk about more as you get into deliberations, and I'll let Steve talk about architecture. Thank you.
I don't think I can handle the flip flops that Steve is doing, so I'm trying to make it work for both sides. Well, I'll try. So for the benefit of the public, essentially it's a two-story building, 32 units, 16 units per floor. They're all one bedroom. Central corridor with exit stairs at two ends. With a central lobby at the main entry point at the center of the building. Directly opposite is a community room, which Steve spoke of, that opens out onto the patio that we were just describing. The second floor is a very similar floor plan. The center of the building over the entry is the communal laundry, and an open deck that's covered by roof that looks over the outdoor patio. 288 units on each floor, one facing front, one facing back. Elevator and a few service spaces, HVAC, electrical rooms, that kind of thing. So for your benefit, nothing has changed since.
Is there a laundry on each floor?
There's not a laundry on each floor, no, just on the second floor. Think an elevator though. With an elevator.
It's just a lot of places, a lot of space.
So the exterior of the building, it's a pretty simple traditional form. It's a long linear building with a hitch roof sort of along the main form of the building, and then that's punctuated by these projecting gabled forms that help to try to break up the building and give it some scale. We're looking at some sort of a synthetic siding, or either be vinyl siding or one of the cement fiber type pre-finished siding, but it would be a clapboard type profile. With white trim, corner boards, sort of a white trim band along the floor line, and then the use of different colors, again, just to try to break up scale a little bit. So at this point, we're looking at sort of a dark blue gray at the base of the building, and then kind of a lighter weathered gray for the main building form, and then a slightly richer gray on the gable forms that punch out. Sort of a 2/2 double hung window type design. The first floor windows are about 10 inches or so taller than the upper windows, just to try to maximize daylight to the outdoor site, because it's a nice wooded site. Covered pitched roof over the entry piece, so it sort of creates a covered porch at the point of arrival. And as I said before, the two exit stairs are sort of at the ends of the building in these smaller lower forms. Asphalt shingle roof. Some sort of clad window. Again, the windows would be probably white with white trim, so try to articulate and offset from the gray colors of the side. Nothing has changed. So just briefly on this door, this is the rear of the building, so this is where that outdoor patio is. We just talked today that it'd be nice to open that up more. So we were starting to look at a sort of a glass slider door, so that, you know, you could also open it in summer and have the screen opening up to the patio, just to try to bring the indoor outdoor connection. But initially, I'm thinking that the sliding glass door approach is a challenge for ADA, because they all have the low tracks, so it's really hard to get a wheelchair over it. It looks like we could do it by sort of recessing the door to the floor, but that concerns me in terms of water infiltration and everything being right at the patio, so. I think it's kind of a variation of what we show here. We're thinking of maybe sticking with a hinge door, but then flanking it with two large windows, probably similar size to this, but at least those are going to be open on either side of the door. I suppose we could do a screen door at the door itself as well. One has to open out, one has to open in. So we could do that, so we could dog the door. Just with a narrow patio, you just don't want the door hanging out there and somebody to lock themselves. So it's a minor design issue, but we're just trying to look at that, trying to make that a little bit more transparent.
Do you have any estimate of the total amount of square footage of the indoor community space?
It will be a guess. Let's say the community room is about 14 by 28. And the center of the building on the second floor is really quite an oversized lounge. You have the piece of the lounge that feeds into the elevator, but then you have a whole other area that could be another seating area. So that whole piece there is probably 12 by 30. But you know, you have circulation through the middle, that so it's probably two sort of 12 by 14 spaces either side. And then you have the covered deck, the patio, which obviously are both outside.
I still hope that in the future, you guys build some sort of a cover for the patio. I mean, this is what, a $6 million project or 9 million? It's a lot of
I don't
millions.
know, it's a lot of money.
I read it somewhere. Anyways, it's many millions. And it, you know, it'd be nice to,
Yeah, I think to be perfectly honest, it's an issue of, as Meg kind of alluded to, and I think you're all well aware that the construction pricing environment has been just crazy, and it's become very difficult for us design professionals to anticipate what the numbers are going to be. And just because there's so much fluctuation, way more than, you know, we're used to. So I think the attitude is, you know, try not to overpromise. You know, I agree with you that I think that would be a kind of a nice added feature to add some shadow on the patio and some visual interest, but I think we'd rather be in a position of adding it if we can, because as we've said, the margins are so tight, and any little blip in construction pricing. So it's a lean
Nothing
process.
says it can't be a seasonal one either that you take down. in the
Yeah,
fall.
I mean, it could even be an awning,
Those,
canvas awning.
it could be a
Correct.
tent,
Later.
correct.
you know.
They do those all the time.
So there's stairs in the center as well as the elevator.
There's not, no,
So you have to take the elevator.
or go to the stair.
So you can get in from the outside to the stairs.
Typically those would be exit only. So
So you can't use the stairs to get into your apartment. You have to use the elevator.
once you come in the main entry, you can go down and use the stairs. I mean, it's more of a management issue. I mean, there's no reason why those stairs couldn't be open, but it's often a security thing because they're so remote. So I
Okay.
defer to you guys. I don't know what
Yeah.
they typically do. But exercise is good.
I just thought that usually you have interior stairs, you know, along with the elevator, but
These are but fire stairs.
Fire stairs, yeah. They do have windows in them, so they're somewhat pleasant.
or they could be keyed, I guess. You know, people had a key,
Yep,
you know what I mean?
you guys do digital systems typically, or is it all keyed? Just shoot, yeah. So that would be a possibility. You could just have it on the key function set so that somebody with a room key could also potentially access those doors. Because you're right, if you're over here in the parking lots here, it'd be nice to zip in and
Right, it would just make it much more.
Yeah.
So is there gonna be an on-site manager for both of these developments? Is that the idea?
right. Yeah. And I think one of the things we made, I can't remember, I think after we had our first meeting, we actually had an office in this building, but as a way to try to gain back more community type space. We got rid of the office in this building because the existing development already has an office. So the thinking is that can serve for both buildings.
We confirmed that with CNC too.
Yeah.
They said that was sufficient for both.
If I could just add a couple things related to overall high level stuff here, the other permits for this project, which I've represented to you, and I guess for the benefit of the public, we did submit DEP applications for the Natural Resources Protection Act wetlands impacts, which is just a tier 1 permit, and that went to the Army Corps of Engineers, and the Corps has actually issued their permit to us, so we do have that. And last I knew, at the end of last week, the DEP is writing up their permit orders and awaiting signature from the commissioner. So besides the wetlands permit though from the DEP, we also submitted a stormwater management permit to them. And I had given you some background as to our stormwater design and so forth with a little basin, a couple little basins for collection of stormwater and water quality treatment and that sort of thing. So I think those are eminent. And as you folks proceed with your deliberations here, consider that. And if it were to be a condition of approval, certainly for submitting of those permits from the other agencies, that would be good for us. And then again, another deliberation piece, your standard, maybe it's more of a question as opposed to a condition per se though, but your site plan standards reflect when you get an approval or offer an approval that an applicant has basically a year to start construction. And I think Meg has already given me kind of our time frame. So that year is, what's the process here locally? Because it suggests, I think, within your code that you have to come back for another approval. And we're like, ooh, okay. We haven't just been able to even start yet. Does the board offer time extensions reasonable? Let's just say like for another year, if we haven't necessarily started exactly on the date year of 2024, 1st of May, on the project.
Commonly, if you don't change anything at all,
Right.
and it has been approved, it's not an issue.
It's like a 5-minute, you come in.
Yeah.
As long as no changes.
I mean, but
Just
there
wait.
again, if you log that lot, put your driveway in and start on your infrastructure, that's all construction.
I hear you, and in many cases, that would be exactly what happens. I can't say that would be the way the Misha projects work, that would actually happen, because they don't typically do kind of piecemeal things to necessarily start or be able to qualify as starting construction. So I just wanted to point that out. It's something to consider, but it sounds as though your process isn't necessarily overly burdensome.
No,
It just, we
as
want
long
to
as you
make
don't
sure.
change
I
anything.
want to make sure that the owners understood, well, you only got a year, and if you didn't start by May 1st next year or whenever, that, we just needed to understand what the process was.
You start changing things though, that.
No,
Well, what if we come back and we add that trellis though?
Somebody would be really happy. Jenny would be pleased.
so
I don't think that would slow it down one little bit.
unless anybody else has anything to add, I think that concludes hopefully our presentation, and I hope that the public have gotten enough out of it, because I'm sure you'll open it up for them to ask some questions. So thank you.
Nope. Okay, anybody from the public got any questions? Go ahead.
Yeah, just should I come up to the?
Please.
Yep.
Hi, thanks for having me here. Stephen Hufnagel, Executive Director of Coastal Rivers Conservation Trust, and thanks for the presentation last time as well. I just wanted to speak in favor of this project. It's on town water and sewer. It's adjacent to existing properties. It's solving a need for housing in this community, which is extreme, and treating our new stormwater regs in a great way, adding filtration as well as dealing with water, the quantities of the water. So we're just wanted to speak from the land trust standpoint in favor of this project and the great work and the great thought behind it to build adjacent to existing things happening. So I think I just wanted to speak in favor of this wonderful project.
Great. Thank you.
Yep.
Come on up.
I'm here to speak in favor of this
You
project.
gotta state your name.
I'm sorry.
We all know you, but you still.
Yeah, I understand. But yeah. So for the record, I am Dick McLean. the hat I'm wearing this evening is I am the treasurer for Mid-Maine Community Action. We are one of the principals in the ownership of this property currently. So my opinion is somewhat biased, although we have no stake whatsoever in this project. But insofar as part of our mission is around housing issues and so on, we think this is a marvelous project and really want to support it. As long as the question of the project, the management came up of the finished facility, I will mention, when we started out, we had an organization that was not functioning well. There were a number of police issues and so on. So we moved to CNC a number of years ago. They have been wonderful. Their management of that facility has been virtually flawless. So as I understand, they're going to be continuing that. That's good. I can hope you will feel comfortable with that. They'll be managing that project as it goes along. So just again, and I am a citizen of Damariscotta, and in that respect too, I'm very much in favor of this project. We would really like to see it go ahead.
Anybody else? Okay, I guess we can close this public hearing. All right. Where you want to start?
Well, is there anything specific? I figure I'll go through well, we can go through the whole thing, like I guess is what we said for the findings of fact. So the project overview, I imagine everybody's 32 units. DC Ledgewood LLC and DC Ledgewood LP now are the applicants, and the property owner is Midcoast Maine Community Action. The details which the applicant spoke to, I'll just kind of gloss over. It's not in the shoreline zone. It is in the rural zone. Chapter 101, the land use ordinance and the site plan ordinance are really what the planning board has to consider when approving this. I came up with that. It appears to be consistent with the town comprehensive plan that was adopted in 2014 and was revised, I guess, in 2015. Being in the village expansion area, one of the town's growth areas, which is supposed to evolve as a residential extension of the village with moderate density housing. Senior housing and retirement and elder care facilities specifically are identified. I think that kind of this project fits with what was contemplated in that comprehensive plan. All right, so I think one of the main things that the board needs to determine is multifamily dwellings are a conditional use in rural area in the rural district. So there's three things that any project has to standards that it has to meet. One is that it meets the or articles 1 through 8 that are set forth in the land use ordinance, which essentially we are reviewing. That's what this whole findings of facts are. The other one is kind of more general, or the second one is a bit more general, which is that it will not have an adverse effect on health, safety, general welfare of the residents of the area. And the planning board should take into account the use on the environment from air, water, soil, pollution, noise, traffic congestion, soil erosion, burden on the sewage disposal and water supply. I think the applicant's already kind of spoken to getting letters from the Salt Bay Sanitary District and Water District. We can discuss traffic congestion, soil erosion, air pollution, noise, anything that you all.
I don't think it's not gonna produce a lot of that anyway.
I wouldn't think so.
This is a pretty
Um,
quiet and subdued development.
Yeah, I wouldn't think that it's gonna have a significant impact on any of that, and in any cases where there is a organization like the sanitary district or something that can speak to it, so far, all the letters have said they've got capacity, they can handle it, and it wouldn't be a major disruption, so. And then the third condition is that the planning board may attach conditions as it sees necessary to ensure the above requirements. So I come up with, and which we'll get to in a little bit, the conditions of approval that I think are appropriate. And we can adjust as you all see fit. Applicant spoke to the dimensional standards, which there's, I guess, capacity, if you will. They could fit several more units on the site without exceeding the density standard, so that's good. And I know the applicant spoke to this, but I also confirmed that the density of the existing Ledgewood courts after this gets divided, they also do not exceed the density requirements. So both of these would be, I think, meet the standards. The setbacks and everything, we can discuss the building setbacks and the parking lot setbacks. All seem to be met. I know the parking setbacks were not met on the previous design. The updated design does specifically that there's that 30-foot setback from the rear lot line to the parking. I guess you've got six inches or so, 8 inches in terms of building height. The rural district maximum is 35 feet. This proposed building is 34 feet 4 inches, so just under. And that should do it for the land use ordinance. So the site plan review ordinance, authority, purpose, applicability. Let's see. The landscaping, happy to discuss as needed. Yeah, the applicability there. Did you want to discuss that?
No, go ahead.
Yeah, it's standards for that fourth one, the site plan review ordinance are applicable project. Mainly because it's multifamily. Creation of impervious surface of more than 5,000 square feet, including rooftops, gravel areas, all of that. So all of this is relevant. I think most of the waivers are going to fall under this site plan review ordinance, and we'll discuss each one. I'll run through them. Let's see. Lighting is the first thing that I've got that maybe we should discuss, because we'll definitely need to or we'll need to have a specific kind of finding for some of these. So the issue of the lighting intensity, the foot candles per square foot. What's proposed is that 2.3 foot candles maximum in the parking area, with the average of 1.2 and a minimum of 0.4 foot candles. So some of the things that we discussed, and that come up just generally when you're considering lighting standards, is our code doesn't have an average, like to measure consistency. There's no standard for average, but I do think it's a good thing to consider, especially if you're thinking about safety and things like that. Walking through a parking lot, if it's uneven, you'll get, when you're in the light, and then you walk out of the light, it's hard to say, like anybody's experienced anywhere with kind of dramatic differences in lighting. So I think that the average lighting here is fairly consistent, which I think is a good thing. The intensity of 2.3 is obviously it's above the ordinance standard of 1.0, but that's, like I said, I provided this technical assistance bulletin, which you can dismiss or not, but it's just for reference from what was the state planning office that suggests, as I said, I assume this is a parking areas with low nighttime activity, which the state recommends a maximum of 2.0 foot candles. So The proposal is still 0.3 foot candles above that. That, you know, you all get to decide if you think that that's a standard you want to waive. High nighttime activity is 4.0 foot candles. For high nighttime activity. So I don't know if there's any discussion on that point, thoughts, decisions by the board.
Well, I think if our ordinance says that it should have a maximum of 1.0, and that's what we should do. I mean, is that what we have over at Camden at the bank? Is it 1.0? I don't remember
I'm
them
not
having
sure
a
that was
waiver.
That low.
It's low but adequate. I mean, when I go by there at night, I can really see everything.
You're talking about the new
Yeah, the.
along Route 1 where Camden
Yeah,
is now.
Honestly, though, that project has no other ambient lighting around it. Where the bank does. There's more lighting around that bank. This project's kind of standalone and you really can't see. There's heavy screening all the way around that project. There's woods around it. It's not like a commercial project that's up against a highway with more commercial buildings. I honestly think the 0.3, which is what it was, 0.3 above.
Is, yeah,
No,
oh, well, that's,
no,
it's actually 1.3
our
over the
ordinance
standard.
Has,
ordinance.
has a
1.3 in
one
total.
point, 1.0, and they're asking for 2.3.
One small spot on the site.
Yeah.
Like I say, this is.
So that's right at the,
And it's at the most important area
the
too, at the front
average-
entrance.
it's right at the front.
What was the average on the lighting in the?
The average is 1.2 for the parking area.
Okay, well, that's what I'm talking about, the average of the thing, not a specific spot in the middle of the parking lot. I will tell you that if you go up to the bank and you stand directly under one of those lights, that lighting quality is gonna be much higher than it would be if you were away from it also.
Mhm.
See what I'm saying?
Well, I mean, it's over here by the dumpster, it's 2.8. I mean,
Yeah.
it's 4.4 right by the entrance, and then you have all these wall mounted lights, you know, bathing the building in light.
Do you have a copy of the ordinance? And the lighting?
You do.
While he's looking that up, I would speak in favor of the proposal based on the issue of safety.
I would. do.
He's selling it on safety, and I wouldn't want to,
You gotta pick
cut
people-
corners when it comes to the place being safe. So whatever we have, whatever the state recommends, and with this proposal is very close to the state recommendation, I would support the waiver.
I want to look at our ordinances, because I mean, why do we have ordinances then?
Because we can at the time we make them. This is a different time. It's a different presentation. The issue of safety maybe was, I don't know what happened way back.
Well, it
But
wasn't
anyway,
that way back.
that's where I am tonight.
Yeah.
I will say from a technical standpoint, it's virtually impossible to have a 1.0 minimum across the parking lot and then also have a maximum of 1.0 because you're gonna get variation. It's impossible to have,
Right.
you know, you're gonna have hot spots for the light.
I don't,
That's what I meant by that.
Well, hotspots, I can understand that, you know, especially around the entrance and stuff. But
That's why I'm
we
saying.
we're
that
just
look at
worried
an
about like light pollution in,
so.
How are you gonna
the-
have light pollution when you're surrounded by trees that are 60 feet tall? And then you got, this is
But if you're
elderly
bird-
housing, do not. Somebody doesn't need to be tripping.
I think those are the two issues to balance here is light pollution and you know, the dark sky.
These are full cutoff fixtures though. You're not gonna have brightness going up in the air.
Yeah, and so that's you balancing the light pollution and you know light trespass and things like that, which are going to come up in some of the other standards. I just broke this apart so we can kind of take one bite at a time. So it's that versus safety. And it's not like, I mean, you want to be able to see, but it's I don't think this is a unusually dangerous area, but it's obviously a concern.
Are there,
So-
plans to have the lights, maybe on the exterior of the parking lot go off at a certain hour at night?
I'm glad you raised that. That is a very good question, a good point. We talked about that a little bit, and I had offered to the team here that that would be something we could talk about, and if there needed to be a dimming solution, you know, after 10 p.m. until 6 a.m. I'll call it, because in the wintertime, you know, people go to work sometimes 6 a.m. or what have you. So 10 to 6 might be a good time to dim them down, and we could do that. We could put that on a timer, the pole mounts.
'Cause I'm certainly not opposed. I'm in favor of the waiver because of the clientele that's gonna be there and the safety issues. But to maybe get some out of both sides, and maybe if those ones on the outsides could maybe come back at a later time, even if it's midnight. It's gonna help on the,
Well, I think 10 to 6, you know, would be a good time to
Actually,
demise.
the other benefit of that too is that, you know, the residential, all these units facing the parking lot, you know, have bedrooms toward the parking lot, so dimming the lights down during sleeping hours. Is
Correct.
good idea.
Yeah, especially the ground floor
Right.
apartments.
Are you talking about the building mounted lights? Or are you talking about the pole mounted lights as well for dimming? Considering,
Well, it could be
Well, it could
everything.
probably be both.
Both.
I just said the poles because I know I've had another project where these poles, because that's the beauty of the technology nowadays. You can put these things on dimmers. So, yeah, we could do that full.
I think you
package.
just have to be careful, and it's up to them, but I think you have to be careful on how many you put on there, because then you run into the risk of why we're trying to put the lights out there. So it's a happy medium to find, but I think certainly it can be done with even just the exterior. Well, we've seen that happen, so.
Yeah, with these 16-foot tall poles and even I suppose the wall mounts, you know, start dimming those, and I think you're all of a sudden you're gonna realize, oh, okay, it's pretty dark.
Too far the other way.
Because but that's the ability to just.
Yep.
Get it to the sweet spot of sorts. So, and I think it was important, again, that 2.3, that's just an outlier, because given all of these things, it was just that one spot. That isn't where we were at. We were, you know, considerably lower than that. And honestly, I guess I have to rely on the judgment of my lighting designer. He knows what he's trying to satisfy. These are all dark sky compliant, which is, you know, more or less the state of the art pieces. So
Mhm.
At an average.
we're certainly
is that a-
willing. if you
Just-
guys
just a
both Want to
maximum
consider that,
throughout.
that is a condition to do a dimming program with that 10 to 6
it's
type of
not.
timeframe. Put her in
Yeah,
that condition and we will abide.
Would that be a condition of approval?
Sure.
It would have to be, as far as the waiver goes, yeah.
So, yeah, I pulled up the ordinance here, and it is the parking lot. For parking lots, the maximum is 1.0 foot candles throughout, so. That's why the waiver is needed, because the ordinance says 1.0. And after this discussion with the your lighting engineer. And I went and looked to see like what are some other standards, like Portland, their standard's 4.0. My assumption is that if they didn't use this former state planning office recommendation, it is coincidence that the high nighttime activity is 4.0 foot candles. Low nighttime activity, like I said, is 2.0 foot candles. So this, I mean, the maximum is still 0.3 over, but it's right there. And I think that the point that many people were making is that it's the average is 1.2.
I always assumed that was an average,
You know, and I
just because because they are correct. If you get your lighting down below that margin right there, you can't light that parking lot effectively to any degree,
right, and that's I think the average is.
unless you put in 24 or 25 more poles.
Yeah, that's
You
I
just
think how
have a
you'd get there.
cluster of poles out there.
Yeah.
And to reduce that, and that parking lot's not that big. You know, it's not a terribly large parking lot.
Yeah.
Per se.
So, and there are other standards to consider, I think, I break them up because that's just kind of how we need to do it for, findings of facts. But when we look at other things, like there is a requirement that the color range be below 3,000 kelvins, which is like more of an orange rather than a blue. Birds, cell phones, we can discuss all of that, but it's a more orange light, which doesn't mess up, I guess, animals or people's rhythms as much, which the application does meet that. It's the lights are at 3,000. And then the kind of full cutoff and the shielding and things like that we can discuss as well, because there's another waiver that's going to be needed. Some of it, I think, is probably kind of how this stuff is written. But we can, do you want to go and talk about all the lighting issues now, and then we can come back and kind of vote on how the board wants to, decide, or do you want to nail this one down and then go on to the next one? How do
Are
you?
there two different waivers or is this one?
There's a couple, yeah. So let
I
me,
mean, it's lighting.
yeah, for lighting, there's
Two
this.
Separate.
There's this one. There is an issue of shielding, which there's kind of two, which we may discuss, and it's probably one of them is about how the ordinance talks about shielding from 75 degrees above nadir, which is 0 is directly down, and so like 75 degrees is not quite horizontal. I think all of the lights here are full cutoff, but the standard for the code is 75 degrees, so you don't get any uplighting. As we discussed, and with the lighting engineer, there's newer standards, there's different standards. I think bug is the one that you all referenced, which is like backlighting, uplighting, and glare maybe, or I don't forget what G is. I know it's in
I
this
forget what the
application.
acronym stands for, but it's BUG.
Yeah, so a lot of this is just like kind of what we want. The code doesn't talk about, I don't think it talks about backlighting, or it kind of addresses uplighting through the full cutoff. And so that's something that we should discuss, and I'm happy to go into a little more detail there. That may be more of a clarification, and it's kind of up to you whether the standard is met or whether a waiver is needed. The other one is,
Mike, if I could just add something. So we submitted the pole mounted, it's a Beacon Viper fixture. And if you looked at that fixture, I'm pretty confident that fixture is nearly exact to the bank. Because I recall from the first time we were here, and it might have been for the clipper ship, that you folks made reference to that. Oh, that's our most recent project. Kind of use something like we just approved for the bank, and I had taken a look at it. I gave that to the lighting guy. I said, "Oh yeah, that's pretty much what we're providing. That's the sort of fixture. It's a pretty thin fixture. I mean, they're not. They look out of the norm, so to speak, because they're a lot smaller than the pole that they sit on. But that's the fixture. So it was intended on basically, if you folks were comfortable for the one at the bank, then that's what we provided.
So Jonathan, I would suggest that we move with this particular issue of the lighting, and we hopefully approve that waiver and then move on to the other.
Yeah, and the other,
Waivers that come up.
so let's deal with the lighting waivers. There's two of them. One involves the foot candle,
one is a foot
and
candle.
the other one is the height of the bollard, right?
Well, that's another one. So I'll say it's the lighting intensity, which is the foot candle one. There is shielding, which is the 75 degrees above nadir, which is full cutoff. I will say these lights I think are more controllable as far as which direction. If you look at the application, there's like these diagrams that basically show where it falls, and relative to like kind of below, looking kind of from bird's eye view down. And if you, depending on what you want and which the applicant kind of selects, this is what we want, because we don't want any backlighting, we don't want too much front lighting or whatever. So they're more controllable than just like an incandescent bulb so I think that might be one of the issues where the shielding comes in. So anyway, so there's that. So those are two. There's a third one, which is lighting at the property line. which I don't think will be an issue. But the board should.
There literally isn't any, is there?
No, they've made it so there is none.
Yeah.
But I bring that up because that's kind of what the shielding is talking about and being visible from offsite. So you probably can see the light source from offsite, but there's no actual light on the ground at the property line. So I don't think it's an issue.
That's a waiver.
That's not.
That's not a waiver.
So good. I wanted to confirm that. I didn't want to make that
So
decision.
given all
for you.
that very informative information, I would suggest that we approve the waiver for lighting.
For those,
Period.
okay.
That would be what I'm prepared to move, but we're in the discussion stage, so.
That works. And there also is the last one is the bollard height, which is not so much about, I mean, it is a light. It's not about lighting. It's just about the height,
6-inch height.
Yeah.
Change it that much.
which I would say next to a fire lane, which is where they are. Additional height probably is a benefit.
Yeah.
Because it'll be that much, especially if you're in a situation where there's snow, you get 30 feet of snow. At least it'll be 6 inches. There'll be a little something that maybe you'll be able to see. So
So I'd like to make a motion, or you sort of made a motion to approve the two waivers. One, allowing the proposed bollards to be 42 inches.
Okay.
In height, and also allowing lighting that provides a maximum of 2.3 foot candles in the parking area.
You did a good job with that, Jenny.
And then once if that's seconded,
With the condition of
Well,
dimming,
well, I was gonna do should the condition be later? As and adding a condition of approval
okay.
that we have a required dimming of the lights between
10 and 6.
10 and 6,
Okay.
Is this all lights on all exterior lights?
all exterior lights.
Second. We got a second for that, Jonathan. That was an official.
Did you second it?
Yes, I did.
Okay, all those in favor? All those opposed? There you go.
Okay, and let's, in our review of the standards, our ordinance, we need to look at this lighting one.
I think that the lighting, that standard is substandard. There's
Yeah.
no way to light a parking lot using that standard. You can't do it safely.
The
What?
maximum of 1 foot
It's
candle.
just not, it's not safe.
Yeah, it's
It's
interesting.
like standing out there with a big lighter going.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's just,
Okay,
that, yeah, I
I
agree. We gotta
remember,
look at
Jenny,
it. We gotta
way
start
back.
there.
One side chairman said, as a planning board, we're not perfect. Just remember that.
I know.
All right,
Okay.
let's
So,
keep on going.
I think I got those.
So the next waiver that we're considering,
Have no issues with the parking at this point.
Parking, landscaping, I think sounded like
Bollards are all done.
you're all good. Okay.
Yep.
My paper.
Originally a waiver was requested for the,
Sidewalks, right?
yeah, that was a separate one. I was gonna talk about the,
building
kind
appearance.
of protrusions,
Yeah.
yeah, the building appearance where not 6 feet. So a waiver was requested after some discussion last week. It sounded like because the requirement really is that
If it's facing a
it's
public.
facing a public street,
street.
but it's so far from a public street that,
And it's not a
and
public
it doesn't
street.
face it, and it's not a public street.
right, okay, so then,
Not an
no waiver required and the design meets
Yeah.
the standards, so that's good.
So the sidewalks width,
Yes,
that's the next one.
yes, it is.
So I would like to suggest that we approve a waiver allowing the sidewalks to be 6 foot in width rather than 8 foot.
Are you sure you're feeling all
I
right?
feel totally good about this. Yeah, let's move this along.
Given
a
that
bit.
she's in good health, I second.
Okay.
I want to just be clear that part of I think part of that standard is.
Oh, the bumps, the stops.
Well, is a connection to the street, what is it, Piper Mill, which I don't think the board wants to waive that. It's just the sidewalks can be 6 feet rather than 8 feet, but it is still connecting to Piper Mill, which
Right.
they're also
Correct,
proposing.
but
Right.
all 6 foot.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so I just want to make sure, so that if you're okay with that, that's good.
Okay, it was
Do we
seconded,
get a
right?
second?
Oh, yes, yes.
Okay, all in favor.
Whoa, that's a chairman's job.
Okay, I know.
You
I
can't
was
make
just-
all decisions.
Maybe,
You ready?
yeah, we're ready.
All those in favor?
Okay,
All those opposed?
okay, and.
Well,
Does this go back to the first?
no, it's a sidewalks, different way.
Sidewalks.
Sidewalks.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Jenny approved it, made the motion and Wilder seconded.
Now the basketball court. It's there. Okay, I just,
20 by 20.
I'm excited about that.
What basketball court?
That's all right.
That's what we
Moving
have a
on.
lot.
Moving along,
They have,
Okay.
they have a basketball
Oh, okay.
spot. Okay, good.
good.
Where you going?
Oh, the next one is the sidewalks along the outside of along the property line, which
Over to,
That's on the Piper Mill Road.
is, yeah, along Piper Mill Road.
It goes to Piper Mill Road. It's not along Piper.
No, the requirement is for sidewalks at least 5 feet in width should be provided along all sides of a lot that abuts a public street.
it's
think
not
last
public
time-
street, though.
Yeah, so I just,
Right.
So
So
we're-
if we don't need a waiver, then I think it's a
That's
non-issue
not a
because it's not a
public
public
street.
street.
What do you think,
So-
Stephen?
I haven't researched it.
Okay,
wait, they requested a waiver, so it's like,
I think it's a non-issue.
it doesn't
not- it's not
require an
even
issue
a-
because it's not a
a waiver.
public street.
Doesn't apply.
Okay, that works. Needed. Okay, so, screening. Oh, and you confirmed that the trash area was, what, 55
relocated.
feet?
55 feet
yeah.
from the rear property line.
Okay, so that one was on here. I know you sent that, so that one's good. All right, so then the last thing, maybe I can just read through the conclusions of law here that I came up with. I'll try to be quick.
Go for it.
The development proposed in this application is consistent with the comp plan of the town of Damascata as adopted and revised through 2015. Development proposed in this application fits the definition of multifamily dwellings under section 101.4 and shall be considered and regulated as such. Development proposed meets the conditions required for approval of conditional uses as defined by 101.9 C2, which is, we ran through earlier. Minimum land area required by the development proposed in this application does not exceed the land area available on the subject lot. Development proposed meets all building setbacks, parking setbacks, and building height requirements. The requirement for the intensity of lighting in this application is being waived by the planning board, and the resulting approval of lighting intensity will be a maximum of 2.3 foot candles rather than the maximum of 1.0. The requirement of the maximum height of bollard lights, it will be 42 inches rather than maximum of 36. The landscape and design of the parking area proposed in this application, including the landscaping within and adjacent to the parking, the placement of wheel stops, and the dimensions and number of parking spaces meet the requirements of the to accommodate parking and stormwater. The development proposed in the application qualifies as large-scale development under subsection 102.7, shall be considered and regulated as such. Employment of architectural features of protrusions or recesses with a depth of at least 6 feet along the facade has been found to be unnecessary by the planning board due to the distance of the building from the nearest public road. Actually, that one maybe should be adjusted because it's, from what I'm understanding, it is not being considered a public road. Correct. Okay, so I will adjust that, but it still is not being required. The requirement for the width of all sidewalks proposed in the application has been waived by the planning board, resulting in an approved sidewalk width of 6 feet rather than 8 feet. The requirement for the sidewalks to be provided along the entirety of the property boundary, which abuts Piper Mill Road, also waived by the planning board. This one, I think, is the same thing, not a public road, so we're gonna waive that.
Yeah, it's like
So-
it didn't apply.
Yeah, it doesn't apply, so I'm gonna make sure we address that. And the last one is just the trash collection area is sufficiently far from the property line. I'm gonna make that more specific, 55 or 54, whatever the actual distance is. Are there any other items that you want kind of specifically called out here for these conclusions?
So they had mentioned putting painting and maintaining crosswalks.
Oh,
Correct.
on Piper
Uh,
Mill.
Yeah, I'd like, yeah, and I'd like to just have that down in writing somewhere.
Okay, so
So that it
maybe,
doesn't become a town responsibility.
yes, that
It
one,
wouldn't be anyway, because it's not a town road.
I know.
So there's
Okay.
no way it can become a town responsibility, private property.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a matter of time before it becomes a town road, don't you think?
Either
Yeah,
road's
I know.
still not.
wow. That's, yeah, it's
Another
kind of hard to
conversation.
regulate after what the town does in,
Correct.
10 years, but
And they really can't, I mean, they've given word that they're going to do that. They really can't tell where that's gonna be. And clearly, all it is painting lines on the road. Because whether it comes out on one side of the driveway or the other side of the driveway, it's not like they're gonna put a crosswalk across Piper Mill. It's just gonna be a painted crosswalk wherever the tip downs come. So it's really kind of a
But it's,
issue.
but it's a public safety issue. I mean, you're gonna have a lot of people in that development.
I agree.
Right, but so they put them in the one time. Who's gonna make them paint them and keep them up to, you know what I mean? So we can't make them do something that we're not gonna be able to enforce later on.
I guess it's,
well, I think we can make it a condition of approval, make that they put because I don't think the crosswalks are not on the plan right now, right?
Correct, because I didn't know exactly where to put them.
Yes, which is fair. So we'll just make sure that that's in there.
We are amenable to putting them in. so-
Okay, great. And then we can put in that they need to be maintained.
Well, those curbs are gonna be ramped anyway, so that's when it's done. That's where they gotta go.
That's right.
So we can put that in there as a condition and trust that they'll be good neighbors to maintain them. Defining what that is, not really in the code. I mean, I guess we could get into it, but sounds like maybe that's not what the board.
because this particular property really drains into Casner Creek and has all those wetlands, I'm concerned about application of fertilizers and pesticides on the grassy areas, herbicides. Because it's, this is a major, that whole Casner Creek watershed is a major tributary to the river, to the Salt Bay and the oyster growing areas. So I don't know if that's sort of stepping beyond, like property management stuff. I don't know what the common practice is in these types of developments. Like, do you hire a
Groundskeeper, basically.
company to come in and spray stuff, or what do you guys do? How do you? Yeah, I mean, at the bank, I always see little warning, don't
You might
touch
not.
or, let your kids anywhere near here and all animals that touch it will die. But, so I don't want any of that sort of stuff. How
I
would
think,
we-
I don't think that falls under the land use and site plan review for the planning board. But that is just generally a
It's a
good
citizen
thing
concern, I should say.
that, yeah, I mean, hopefully they will do it, but I think that's something the municipality probably can regulate, but probably not the planning board,
Yeah,
so
not through this way. Okay.
belongs in the comp plan at least, so.
I think Portland just did that. Don't we have a ordinance now for?
Portland and South Portland do, they regulate, fertilizer use.
Topical
I live in South
application,
Portland.
just fertilizers or also like herbicides and stuff?
Yeah, I think it's both. It's pretty comprehensive. I worked on it a long time and all the hardware stores were not very happy because you can't sell much for fertilizer anymore. It's all about nitrogen loading and all that sort of thing. what I can offer for our landscape plan and what the landscape architects, their approach to things, you'll see on our plan that we have basically what he calls a restoration mix, which is intended on being low maintenance. Meaning not putting fertilizer and mowing it. So you've got lawn areas here in the planting and on this end. Everything else is a restoration mix, which is basically meadow. And then I said, probably will get mowed maybe once or twice a year. If it gets too unruly and high, it's not an area where there's gonna be maintenance per se, like, oh, guy with a spreader going out, putting, you know,
Okay, it's not gonna be a manicured lawn,
no,
okay?
no, it's all meadow area. Which you take population like up in Damascotta, you know, that's the issues that you have with meadows and stuff like that. It's ticks, I know, in southern Maine and in Portland, South Portland. Any place where there's high grass, you walk through, you don't walk through. Unless you got your tick repellent on.
All right. Okay, well, I just thought I'd bring that up because it is a concern.
Yeah, I made a note and that,
Okay.
like I said, I think that's a good thing to discuss.
And we can
in
look at,
comp
see
plan stuff.
what Portland and South Portland's doing.
Okay, so conditions of approval, what I've got on here, I'll just read it. All conditions of approval must be satisfied before a building permit can be issued unless specifically stated otherwise. There are two that I know I need to add in here. One is fire and life safety. Just want to, the
Usually
planning
provide
board's
water.
approval will be conditioned on their approval.
Okay.
And then as well as any letters that are still outstanding that you've requested already, I know.
I did send you the CMP one, so. I think
Yes.
We have all the three major utilities, power, water and sewer have all.
Okay. So we'll make sure that any other organizations that need to approve this as an ordinance, and I'll check, there may not be any more. Maybe we haven't gotten all of them now.
Would you say DEP is still waiting on the
What
one?
about that?
Exactly, I was just gonna say, I think that. That's not category.
Correct,
Yeah,
correct.
so again, the planning board's approval will be conditioned on getting those letters. And then what I've got currently in here is per section 102(7)E, the property owner or developer shall replace or cause to be replaced within 30 days or as seasonally required by the species. Any landscaping that dies, is removed, or otherwise requires replacement. Such replacement landscaping shall be equivalent in species and size to the original landscaping unless the applicant can demonstrate to the satisfaction of the planning board the site conditions require an alternate species of comparable size. Landscaping as depicted on the site plan is considered an integral component of the approved development. Should any portion of the landscaping that dies or is removed or otherwise requires replacement, not replaced within 30 days or as seasonally required by the species, should be considered a violation of the approval granted by the board pursuant to section 102.5H and shall be subject to enforcement provisions of section 102.14. So basically, got to maintain the landscaping.
Curious if that have time.
You know, it should, I would think. This one does not. I think this was one that you guys already had on previous approvals, so. But that's a good question. I'll check on a time limit because
Forever. Yep.
prior to the issuance of a building permit or release of the recording subdivision, if applicable, which is not really in this case, the applicant should pay all outstanding review escrow account fees. And prior to the issuance of a building permit, the applicant shall submit 2 hard copy plans at 24 by 36 inch size to the town planner with all conditions and waivers lifted on the plans. And then I know I need to add the requirement for the crosswalks, and they're going to provide them and maintain them. So those are the conditions. Are there any other conditions that I missed or that you like to consider? No? Good.
I think we're good.
All right, and then there's just some other, there's just some other additional terms and limitations, which are kind of conditions, but are, I think, more general. All approvals are dependent upon and limited to the proposals and plans containing the application and supporting documents submitted and affirmed to by the application by the applicant. Any variation from the plans, proposals, and supporting documents are subject to the review and approval of the planning board prior to implementation. This planning board approval is valid for 12 months from the date of approval and shall expire if work is not substantially commenced within that time period. The applicant may only secure building permit from the code enforcement officer in coordination with the town planner, fire department, and all relevant review authorities prior to commencing any construction activities. Construction shall be considered to be substantially commenced when any work beyond the state of excavation, including but not limited to the pouring of slab or footings, the installation of piles, the construction of columns, or the placement of a manufactured home on a foundation has begun. Construction shall be considered to be substantially completed when it has been completed to the point where normal functioning, use, or occupation can occur without concern for the general health, safety, and welfare of the occupant and general public. At a maximum, it shall include the completion of no less than 70% of the costs of the proposed improvements within a development, and shall include permanent stabilization and or revegetation of areas of the site that were disturbed during construction. I think those actually I just pulled from, some of them anyway, from the ordinance, though. To put it on here for you. And then I think that's everything I need to pull this together. So, assuming that I don't find anything else in here, the board could, if they would like to
I think
vote
we're off and
on
running.
whatever it is you'd like to vote on.
Well, I think the first thing we gotta vote on is whether the application is completed or not. We
Yes,
haven't done
that's
that.
that's a good, that would be a good start, yeah.
I make a motion that we move that the application is complete.
Okay, all those in favor? All those opposed? Good.
Yes.
I think we've covered this pretty well. I'm pretty comfortable with it. The changes we made were certainly sound.
There was one, got an email from someone who couldn't make it to the meeting tonight. I don't think that specifically, there aren't any traffic, major traffic issues that are expected from this. But somebody, a resident did email saying, is a four-way stop, has it been considered for the intersection of Piper Mill, High and School Street?
That hasn't been considered on our end.
It was
That is
talked
like-
about at the last project for
We
that
did-
road.
We
but-
did talk about it, but isn't that a DOT assisted road? Anything that happens to that road has got to come from DOT. No matter what suggestions or things that we say to them, they will listen to us a tiny little bit.
Yeah, no, familiar with
Yeah,
DOT.
I'm sure you are. So, but anything that would happen on that road in regards to like four-way intersection would have to come from them. I mean, like I said, we could put out a suggestion, we can't do that. We can't,
Yeah,
we
make
can't
them
do anything.
put it in there, yeah.
I think maybe forwarded to the town manager and them and the selectmen can make that suggestion to DOT, and that's probably
That
gonna
would
be the
be
route
the-
it has to go and have. Those will have to be.
Yeah.
But that may not fit well with their present scheme about traffic redirection, which I don't particularly love either. With that road. They've got big plans to mess that up badly, as far as I can say.
Good.
I mean, it's,
That now's the time
I think
to.
somebody up there picking on the town of Damascus.
think.
I do.
So we've voted that this is complete.
Yes, we have.
So should we vote to accept the,
If there's any other discussion, anybody else has anything else to say, now is the time to say it.
Okay.
Okay,
I think probably my recommendation would be if you're considering approval
Yeah.
would be an approval of. Let me just make sure I want to get the wording right here.
You get conditions of approval.
With the conditions of approval, absolutely, yes, yeah, to approve with the conditions
Yeah.
as we discussed.
Along with the finding of the fact and conclusion of law.
Yeah.
The condition of approvals.
And for that, it's approved for the conditional use permit and site plan application. Is what it, because there's kind of two.
Okay.
Mouthful, you got it.
You
Control
can do
that.
that.
Oh, you guys looking at me, so here we go.
We can next this.
I'll make a motion that we find the project complete and approve with the findings of the facts and conclusion of law that was presented on 5/1/23, as well as the conditions of approval under and the conditioned use permit and site plan applications.
Nicely done, bud. You're getting good.
Way beyond my expectations. but there you
Anybody
go.
wanna make a second?
I second that.
All right.
Oh, sorry, Ann, I
Okay, you got it.
All those in favor?
wound up.
All those opposed?
I,
You know,
I think you all did a really
back.
nice job on this application, and I really appreciate how you
They've listened.
listened to us
Right.
and really tried to tweak it, you know, given your constraints, but I really felt listened to it. I want to say that it's a rare
I agree.
experience for us.
Definitely.
You've been
Kudos
really
to you.
enjoyable to work with.
Beautiful.
So, I'm sorry we were a bit of a pain, but you know.
And just one level higher than that, I appreciate Jenny actually gets into it.
Well, okay. So we're kind of done with them, but
Oh, I just had a
Yeah.
really quick
Uh,
question. It's not
yeah.
about the application, but the $906 a month rent, does that include anything or
Yeah, that's total.
that includes utilities and,
Yeah.
okay. Thanks.
Good question.
because Anne had actually come up with some interesting numbers.
Well, if that includes everything, it's
That's a
kind of
pretty good
different.
deal.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I thought it was very high, but if it,
My
But-
daughter pays $1,100
oh, I know, yeah.
for an apartment that's half the size of those. And she pays, when she pays her, pardon me? When she pays her own electricity.
Oh, yeah.
So, you know,
Yeah, no, I thought that until I just recently went through the same thing and a 2-bedroom is twice that.
Yeah.
So, and that's not heat and electric.
Yeah.
So with that included, that's
so heat is included.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes a big difference.